When I say the word stop Asian hate, what does it mean to you?
Scam.
I agree.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that was good. I love that. Is an. Hey everybody, Chandler here, and I'm back with a hilarious video. I don't make many videos very often these days. Most of my stuff is live streams, but I saw this video here that we're going to be reacting to, and I said, this is absolutely amazing, and we are going to have to do a reaction video to it. It's a friend of mine, Vince Dow. He went on Vice with an Asian Americans panel, and oh my gosh, once you see just how things happened here, you're gonna laugh just like I was.
Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the entire Democrat basically caucus in Congress literally bent the knee to George Floyd and to Black Lives Matter. Like, they quite literally did that.
And that was a bad thing?
I think it was a stupid thing.
You see the way people at the end were just like,
and that was a bad thing?
I think it was a stupid thing.
That's one of those moments you only see in like sitcoms, the way it zooms in, the girl breathing out. All right, we've got a ton of this to get into, so let's quit pausing. Let's jump right into it. All right, so we're going to be jumping a bit through this because there's some introductions that happen at the beginning here we're not too concerned about, but this is when things start getting good right here. Let's go.
Well, good to meet you. Tell me about yourself, Vince.
Genetically, I'm a quarter Italian, 75% Vietnamese, but I am really with Teddy Roosevelt on this one. I don't believe in the hyphenated American thing. I identify as American. I consider myself an American. Sure, genetically, I'm mostly Asian. I don't go around thinking I'm an Asian American, because I think that, especially considering the fact that America today is increasingly a more and more diverse country, which is what it is, the only way that's going to hold together is if people can, to some extent, all identify as being part of the same nation, part of the same creed to an extent. I mean, that's just the way I would view it.
Vish, you're up.
I'm 100% Hindu,
Shout out
Indian
Vishbara.
American. I was born in Brooklyn. My parents are from India. I personally just describe myself as American. I find, like Vince said, you know, the hyphenated American thing, I think it's by definition divisive when you're dividing the identity. I prefer to call myself American. I don't call myself Indian American, Asian American, though when people ask, like, oh, well, what are you? I'll say, well, I'm of Indian heritage, but I was born in Brooklyn.
Ziad.
I'm Ziad. I use he, him pronouns, and I am Bangladeshi American, and I'm Asian American. The reason why
Watch Vince's face right here. Watch his face.
I use he, him pronouns, and I am Bangladeshi American, and I'm Asian American. The reason why I, is lukewarm about the term Asian American insofar as its usefulness is that I don't actually often refer to myself as Asian American, despite like fully believing that I am, because to Yuling's point, oftentimes I think people have a perception of what Asian American looks like, right? And sometimes that leaves out South Asians. Sometimes that leaves out Central Asians. Sometimes that leaves out huge parts of the world. Me personally, like, I lean into my hyphenated identity. Right? I am American, and I am Muslim, and I am Bangladeshi, and I am Asian, right? And I am all of these things at once, and
so
I'm not
many
one
things.
more than the other, but I take pride in all of these things, and I think that for me, I find power in that insofar as when I look at this country, I think it is so damaging, right? So saddening that sometimes this country makes us choose.
I mean, what you point out is that we kind of all have a dual consciousness, or are dual citizens of this country and the world, which is to say we go home, we might have a different culture, a different food, a different language that we speak. We go to school, and we have friends who might not share or understand what that language culture is, and we have a desire to both be true to the heritage, but then also be accepted, successful, and otherwise in the non-Asian American world that we live in. Assimilation. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a burden? Is it an opportunity?
Assimilation, I think I would define that as, in part, I think necessary to an extent, because we are forced to in order to navigate this country. So I would say learning the language, learning how to like properly behave, for example. That's in part kind of assimilation, making sure that you are
in line.
kosher in this society.
And you listen to that girl, she said in line. She clearly has a problem with assimilation. I'm sure we're going to hear more about that very soon.
And I think in part that means survival.
I think assimilation is not just a great thing, it's a necessary thing. No society can hold together where people have nothing in common, they don't speak the same language, they don't practice the same things. And you may look at something like just food habits or what you eat and think that's fairly frivolous, but the truth of the matter is that on a broader level, when we're talking about more big picture things, differences in race, culture, religion, all these things, people have fought wars, violent wars, killed each other over these things for thousands of years. If America is to hold together, assimilation, not just good or bad, necessary. I don't think it's going to be possible for America to survive as a stable, functioning society if people don't, to some degree, say, well, here's what we're going to commonly agree upon.
But who gets to choose it?
And there we
The
go.
majority culture, I suppose.
And what's
The people-
majority culture?
The people with power.
And who's people with power?
There's people with power.
White people.
Well, I don't know if that's.
I'm gonna say it.
Yeah.
White people. It's okay.
I don't know if that's necessarily so true. I mean,
Wait, can you
look
unpack?
at.
Yeah.
I don't.
Let's
I don't
elaborate.
Think, I don't think a particularly
They're all ganging up on
white
him.
quote unquote interest controls things like
In America.
pop culture.
Do you believe
Well, I
white
think-
supremacy exists?
I think there are people who believe in it. I think there's people who all
Back
believe
to
that
back.
their race is superior.
So you don't believe in white supremacy?
Do you believe America is a white supremacist state?
No.
Won't
I
even
don't
let
know.
them talk.
And not found
No
in
white supremacist state would even allow us to be doing this. I don't understand. So white supremacists, there's just KKK people walking. Actually, I go around New York City. I notice that, I guess Brooklyn a little bit different. Most of the people here are not white, and they're doing their thing. So I don't understand.
What does doing their thing mean to you?
Going to work.
Are they making the same amount of money?
well,
Are they getting the same access to opportunities?
I think they're getting great access to opportunity.
Please unpack it. Are they equivalent? Are communities and communities that are leading culture, to your point, because you pointed to popular culture as something where, in your view, white people don't have the power, when the reality is it is the white executives who are profiting off of and exploiting predominantly black and brown bodies for their financial gain to then parade to us and tell us that we're thriving, when the reality is it is women of color, and it is black folks, and it is Asian American folks, and it is Hispanic folks, and it is people from marginalized communities who are disproportionately being impacted by every adverse thing that society is facing, while the few at the top who don't represent our communities, are profiting. There are massive disparities.
You know what this guy sounds like? A racist. He's blaming everybody's problems on white people. I mean, whenever a white person blames America's problems on black people or Indian people, Asian people, whatever group of people you want to divide themselves into, they're called a racist. And so here goes an Asian American, quote unquote, describing white people as the root of all evil. Sounds like racism. Might need to get that checked out, my friend.
Based on race, based on class, based on gender, based on all of these things that shouldn't exist.
Well, nobody denies that there's disparities or that.
Well, let's have Vince respond.
Or that, I think the question is, do they exist because of supposed white supremacy? And when I look at the fact that, virtually every corporation and institution bends the knee to diversity, celebrates every single Heritage Month, has all these programs, every single one toe the line for Black Lives Matter. I don't look at that
What
and
is
say,
toe the line?
I don't look at that and say conservative white people are in power in this country. As a matter of fact, I'd argue to a large extent, you can talk about, what race or whatever people are, but is like a supposedly conservative white interest in power in America. I would honestly say I think it's the opposite of that.
I want to clarify one thing. You can be liberal and still a white supremacist, right?
Yes.
I would be very clear, right? That it
Absolutely.
doesn't necessarily mean conservative white power is the predominant folks in power. I think it could span a lot of political
Yes.
ideologies and still have these things embedded in how you govern and how you lead and how you make decisions. However, when you talk about bending the knee, that is a wild way, I think, to look at society
It's true.
finally trying in some ways to right the wrongs
It's not
of its
so
ilk.
wild.
Right the wrongs. It's funny how they describe bending the knee as righting the wrongs when we know what bending the knee truly is, and it's not righting any wrongs, it's just continuing the same wrongs.
But I mean, even like your supposedly white politicians, you look at what they did in 2020, they quite literally bent the knee. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the entire Democrat basically.
And y'all have seen that image, by the way, right? I think they were in the Capitol building. They were wearing the African cloths around their necks, and they were literally on the ground with their fists up, and they had the knees going. What a joke! What a joke! It was complete and total pandering.
Caucus in Congress literally bent the knee to George Floyd and to Black Lives Matter. Like, they quite literally did that.
And that was a bad thing?
I think it was a stupid thing. I
Why?
think it was just ridiculous pandering
So
to
Black
a
lives do not
terrorist
matter?
movement ran by.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Black lives do not matter?
I do think that Black Lives Matter. I don't support the movement known as Black Lives Matter.
You ever say all lives matter?
Of course. As a Christian, I absolutely believe
All
all
lives matter.
Absolutely.
And look at them just like immediately be like, oh, well, there it is. That's, you know, you're that type of guy. They obviously immediately put you in a square when, as a Christian American, like Vince is, you have to say all lives matter. That's just how things are. That's how the world is. And they have a problem with that. You guys ever notice that they really divided us up to race, where even the idea of saying a life matters, whether it's black, whether it's Asian, whatever life of type it is, it's all the same type of life. They say all lives matter. That's a problem all of a sudden.
Absolutely.
Well, let me put this back into some more concrete terms. So I guess to try to understand the conflict here that you guys are having, what role do you think Asian Americans have as far as the larger injustices and racism that this country has exhibited and has pushed it forward in the 200 years prior to even our arrival? But I guess the easiest way to make it something to talk about is the concept of the model minority myth. When you hear that word, what does it mean to you?
So the model minority myth, you know, after World War II, they used us to separate other people of color. They used our race to say that we were the best race, that we were the model minority because we were the smartest, we got the best jobs, we did these things, and we were able to assimilate to what their idea of what they wanted. They wanted an example to use of people of color that they could then use against all the other people of color. And what they also did is they caused infighting between our communities so that we wouldn't look at the actual problem, which was white supremacy. When I think of the model minority myth, I grew up wanting to be white. I fucking hate that about myself. Like, it is so embarrassing.
Okay, so statistically, it is true that Asians, right, on average, make more money, in terms of medium, make more money, better test scores, get into better colleges, all that stuff. I think the question is, why is that? And I don't know, model minority, whatever that label wants
That's
to mean.
actually a myth because we cannot be.
Well, no, listen. Well, let me finish my point. We need to.
And they immediately try to jump on him and say, well, your point is invalid because you didn't start off by saying the model minority myth is indeed a myth. And like, he's going on talking about the reality of the situation and Asian Americans' places in society, whether it's on average and the generality is about their group and what they're able to accomplish. And he then goes on to discuss some of the reasons for that. He goes to ask, why is that? And they immediately try to jump on him. They don't even want to hear it.
Observe what makes people successful and unsuccessful. And I think when you look at trends that are generally true in the Asian community, not of everyone, but are generally true, usually you have families that are sticking together. You have, you know, people are taught to work hard in school, not get into trouble. I think that translates to why Asians en masse are successful. And I don't think you have to be Asian or white for that matter to not have kids out of wedlock, not, you know, commit crime, not cause trouble or whatever it is. It's just a matter
She can't handle it. She can't handle it.
of like, well, common sense, that's what makes people successful. And if that's so-called assimilation, having a nuclear family, buying a house, going to school, whatever it is, then yeah, okay, call me a pro-assimilation then.
I think there's a difference between assimilation and erasure.
Yes.
The way that you're kind of going about it seems like, okay, like, you know, of course, like, we want to be in community with people. And I don't think there's a problem with being in community with people from different backgrounds. That's not the issue. It's also embracing the diversity that we inherently have and accepting that and being okay with that and celebrating that.
That's very idealistic, I think, but I think we should acknowledge the fact that diversity, quote unquote, is not a factor that is our strength. It's not a factor that historically or even in the current strengthens
They did not like that.
People don't come together, form societies, form families, form communities because they have nothing in common. They come together and do those things because they have something in common, right?
You talk about race in such black and white terms. The way you talk about it is it's either with America, whatever your definition of America, or not. You're talking in very black and white terms, and that's actually the problem in discussing race because
Huh? Has she and the people that agree with her not spent the entire time talking about how it was white people this versus everybody else that and model minority and all these different things, talking about how white people set it up so that all the other minorities would be infighting and such, and then goes on to say that trying to unite as Americans is too black and white? I'm trying to walk through the logic here and maybe get a better understanding of how this entire thing is working, in her mind at least, which might be my initial mistake, if I'm being honest.
we're Asian Americans, we're neither black, we're neither white. When you're having a race discussion, you can't be talking about in such like lines.
Yes.
Everything is in the gray.
The more in common that a society has with one another, the more likely they are to work together and build things in
Okay,
society
I hear
and
you.
not constantly be fighting each other and at odds with each other.
Did you think the Japanese internment was a good thing? Because that was a real assimilation situation. You know what I mean?
No,
Do you
I don't-
recognize that the term assimilation
How is that assimilation if they put them in camps? Now, I'll admit, I don't know every single thing there is to know about the internment period, but that sounds like the exact opposite of assimilation, if I'm being honest.
Has negative history and facts associated with that word. So we do have to be careful in how we choose, because assimilation for people of color have not been good to us historically. That's factual. So let me ask you.
We're discussing the model minority myth
but
and the fact
Japanese
that
internment is a classic example of assimilating Asian Americans.
no,
So
it's
do you
not.
think
It's a
that-
classic example of internment. I mean,
I mean, we're saying the exact same thing here. In no way does the dictionary definition of assimilation and the dictionary definition of the internment period line up whatsoever. It's a completely different thing. One of them is bad, one of them is directly racist, one of them has the exact opposite meaning of the other. In fact, they both have the exact opposite meaning of the other, because assimilation of Japanese people would be, hey, come move here, learn this language, maybe you start eating this food, or, you know, these various things that on face value might seem very frivolous, but are ways to keep a society together, because a society divided is a society not at all.
intern people.
Why?
Like, it's
Why?
not-
Yes.
To
Why do they
correlate that to
Why did they intern them? Because they saw them as
Because-
other. Because they saw them as dangerous.
not really. Well, yes, they saw them as dangerous because, and I don't agree with it, but
Exactly.
left-wing President FDR at the time saw it as a national security
So
risk.
you're
or
a
whatever.
Republican, right?
So
You're
let's-
right-wing, right?
I want to make sure that we move this way to keep
Yeah, I was
talking.
about to
Thank
say.
you for all the passion on this, and I think there's a lot to unpack. Joyce, tell me about your feelings about the model minority
All right,
myth.
let's hear this.
What does it make you think about?
For me, like, I don't think race should be an issue in anything. Like, when we want to make a decision, we should not put race as a factor. Living in New York City, we're the melting pot of the world, so I haven't actually experienced any of these biases. And if we keep continuing to live on, remembering how history was, we're never going to move further. So I identify myself as American, and in this country, it's the only country where a homeless person can be a millionaire the next day. So based on capitalism, we all have an opportunity, and we should not use race as a factor in either getting ahead or
Look at these
depriving
guys shaking their
ourselves of
heads.
opportunities.
They're like, no, my programming does not accept such phrases and ideologies like maybe people can indeed actually recover from financial hardship. No, this is wrong. Capitalism bad. Orange man bad.
I have a question directly related to the fact that you live in New York, right?
Yeah.
And you're Asian women. There have been significant high crimes towards Asian women that were all over the news. Did that affect you? And what were your thoughts on that?
The
I mean,
government is
factor.
telling us that it's Asian hate, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is actually that these people were mentally ill and they were let
Or
out.
both can be
Or-
the issue, right?
Yeah,
it
Yo!
can simultaneously
Based.
exist as issues.
You can't say that it's Asian hate and use that as propaganda to
Propaganda.
Yes.
I feel like also to just say that these people are mentally
Propaganda.
ill is a kind of an ableist
They really can't
argument
handle it.
too, because there's plenty of people
Ableist.
who are mentally ill who are not going out and killing like Asian people on the street.
All these attacks that you're seeing the videos of in San Francisco, New York City, newsflash, they're not being prosecuted as hate crimes. So the more correct way to look at it is what is the primary perpetrator of violence against Asians overall, right? Because if we talk about these videos, we have to count them in the statistics, and we're not doing that. And when we do that, we find, well, I'll tell you this, the plurality top perpetrator of violence against Asians,
about to
number
say
one,
it.
it's not happening in rural America, and number two, it's not being done by white people.
So is it black
Supremacists are
people that are doing it? Like, is it the
that's
black and brown
By-
people
by
that are doing it?
statistics-
No,
by
that's
statistics-
exactly-
Just inherently
by
violent?
statistics-
Like,
Just say it.
I didn't say that. All I
Why
said
beat
was,
around it? Just
all I
say it.
said-
And if it's not white
all I
people or
said-
Asian people,
all
who
I-
is it?
All I said, I didn't say anything about
Very good.
inherently violent. All I said is that if it's
now
a,
you did.
If it's
no one accused you of that, and now
if
you did.
it's a white-
So like your
No, no,
bias
no.
is slipping out
It's
there.
Can
clear
anyone let
you
me
wanna
talk here?
say it. You should
Can
just
anyone let
say
me
it.
talk here?
When
Yeah.
it comes to Asian hate,
And he
the
didn't end up talking.
perpetrator is not a white supremacist in New York.
Correct. That's all I'm saying.
So that's the
all
problem.
that I'm saying.
Like, we don't want to blame one race for violence when
Of course
that's
not.
actually not true.
Is it white people? Is it white people?
It is white people.
Are these attacks happening
It is white
in
people.
rural-
I literally looked up statistics.
You do not have to be white to perpetuate white supremacy. No one's saying it's not hard to govern a heterogeneous society, but it is possible to do a lot better than the way that we're fucking doing it right now. It's like we've banked on this myth of white adjacency more than this model minority myth of like, instead of aligning ourselves with the black community who've been fighting fighting for racial justice and liberation, right? And acknowledging our own privilege and putting our bodies on the line to fight for these movements. Instead, we banked on white adjacency, and here we are still being pushed into subways.
Okay, first of all, what exactly is white adjacency?
Yeah, I want to know.
Hard?
What? Yeah, yo, wait, run that back.
Are still being pushed into
What
subways.
is first of all, what exactly is white adjacency? Is it working hard, having families?
I don't
understand what the issue is. But then,
Yeah, there you go. Once again, to the tolerant people that are like, you can't view race as, you can't view these issues as black and white and all that. And then you go on to say white adjacency. And, I'm going to make an inference that white adjacency is exactly what Vince is describing here. And he picked it up amazingly well, that these these Asian Americans on this panel that are complaining about white adjacency and claiming that because the Asian community and such try to chase after white adjacency, and it's good to ask what the heck that even means, but because they chased after that, they didn't stand by their black brothers and their Latino brothers and all these different things for their chasing of justice. I just don't understand. What is white adjacency?
Number two, let me finish my point. I think it is gaslighting when, again, the majority of violent attacks against Asians are not being perpetrated by white people to blame white supremacy.
White supremacy
It doesn't make
as
sense.
A construct is this idea that the norm of American is whiteness.
Yes.
That whiteness is the default.
Standard.
That whiteness is the standard that we all ought to aspire to. And
Tell me, what is whiteness? I need to know. What is whiteness? Because the only definition I can drum up in my head is various racial groups, usually originating from Europe and some other places, that have lighter skin and have various heritages that will connect them back to it. So that excludes a big chunk of people, and it excludes maybe about a little bit like 48% of America, and that half, it's starting to get very close to that halfway point. So what is whiteness? Because I don't think a lot of people in America are saying, well, you can only be American if you're white. Now, if you're going to answer us as what whiteness, or I guess even white adjacency is, that might help us figure out just what you mean here, because it sounds like another argument in saying that, well, we can't be Americans because we're not white, in which you'd be perpetuating the exact same thing you claim to be against. So maybe define what you mean here.
It's not just talking about KKK.
Yeah.
It's not talking about lynchings. It's about a mentality that we have absorbed.
I'm gonna interrupt for a second. Yuling, what's going through your head right now?
Model minority myth, if I'm not wrong, I actually think that Asian Americans did create that first and foremost to push the notion that we are dangerous away. First to say that, no, we belong here because I promise you we will not cause harm to you. And that has trickled down now into becoming almost a curse. Historically was used first to be we're not dangerous, we're American, we are American. But later on it has moved into this sort of weaponized term / almost idea concept where we get to say because we are model minority, we're not dangerous and we're not this. And I think about this a lot with class, a lot of Asian women who are sex workers. Who are we actually taking into account when we think about model minority? And I think that term really applies to a very specific amount, or that idea of what that looks like is very specific. Because when I think of the Asian Americans that I know, I don't think that they're worried about whether or not they look like model minority. I think they're just trying to survive.
Vish, I see you percolating over there. What's going through your brain?
I don't understand why everybody's so hurt about being described as a model minority. For me, it's well, I want to be the best. I want to be the smartest. I want to be the toughest. The model minority thing, I've never thought about it because I'm too focused on trying to be a model American.
When I say the word
There you go.
Asian,
There you go. There you go, bitch. That's what I'm talking about, man. That's what I'm talking about. I don't understand this whole model minority thing when we're trying to really break down the whole minority majority thing and just have it be Americans. That's what Vish and Vince and I believe one other on this panel are talking about, in saying that we don't care if you view us as Asian Americans. We view ourselves as Americans. We understand that we have heritages that date back to Asian lands and these various heritage groups, but we are trying to be Americans. So we're not model minorities, as Vish so well put it. We want to be model Americans. And the model American is successful in many different ways. And that's exactly what they want to be.
Asian hate, what does it mean to you?
Scam.
I agree.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that was good. I love that. Is an amazing little segment right there. Hold on. Just what do you think of Stop Asian Hate?
When I say the word Stop Asian Hate, what does it mean to you?
Scam.
I agree.
Why?
Based.
I see it as the same way as the BLM organization. It's just a cudgel meant to divide Americans on racialized language and racialized ideas. that are not really congruent with reality. The Stop Asian Hate movement, makes a big fuss about white supremacy. So I find that to be a scam in a similar way that BLM makes a boogeyman out of cops and white people and white supremacy and all that. It's all the same language and all the same sort of ideas that are being used to divide Americans and basically put Asians in fear of something that I personally do not think exists.
Who agrees with Vish?
No, I don't.
Raise your hands up high. Let's hear it. Why?
I mean, I agree with everything he says because they're basically weaponizing it and making us victims, but we're not victims. We have friends that are of different races. If you start to use the word hate, hate will continue. Hate is a very strong word.
So even when it's Stop Asian Hate, you're still like, wait, it has Asian hate in here, and we should not even consider it as a serious thing?
It's divisive.
Well, it's referring to murders, people getting attacked in broad daylight, elders getting bashed in the head. I fear for my mother-in-law going on walks.
So when are we going to do Stop White Hate? Or Stop Latino Hate? Or I guess even Stop Black Hate? When are we going to do these various things? Because these things happen to all sorts of people. In fact, if you drop yourself up there in Chicago, you'll see a lot more people than getting bashed in skulls. You see people getting ran up on and shot in their skull. Leaving behind brothers and sisters, but more often than not, daughters and sons, nieces and nephews. All these different people that, they have family, they have people, they have friends. They get shot dead because of gang violence and other things that are happening in Chicago and other places. And, more often than not, these are black on black crimes. Where's the Stop Black Hate then, right? We don't have a thing for that. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot doesn't say anything about the black on black crime that happens there. Nobody does. But the second you find another way, just a little bit after the Black Lives Matter organization and movement to try and parlay it into Stop Asian Hate, it's nothing but a scam, and you're pandering, and it's like Vish so well puts, incongruent with reality.
I ask her to make sure she's not walking around when it's getting dark.
And
so
there's
it's
the
very
fear.
Real. Getting murdered for being Asian is as hateful as it gets, is it not? Why are we afraid to just say out loud, let's stop Asian hate? It is happening in astronomical numbers. Studies have shown the increase. And where did it come from? Right after the COVID blast of people saying, it's the Chinese virus. There was a direct correlation to that Asian hate. It didn't come out of thin air. So it really minimizes our experiences when you say it doesn't exist.
Here's a radical idea. Okay, you guys ready?
Oh boy.
No, I'm not.
So there's a lot of violence happening. A lot of it's against Asian people. A lot of it is happening in cities. Crazy idea, I know. Then maybe it's not a good idea to let criminals out of jail. Maybe it's not a good idea to defund the police, neuter the police ability to have any degree of law and order in our streets. And maybe you wouldn't have so much violence happening against so many different types of vulnerable people. I mean, this is just the truth of the situation. We can talk about this correlation with COVID. Maybe that's true to an extent. It's also true that
maybe that's true to an extent. What do you mean?
Because it's also true that it's been climbing over the past year or two, whatever. That's also around the same time that we had all of these, anti-police movements. A lot of
But
it
it's also around the same
policy.
time that Donald Trump was calling it the China virus, right?
Well, he's not calling it anymore, and it looks like this stuff is still happening. Problem with saying stop Asian hate and us just saying stigma, whatever, is that it misses the real core of the problem. The real core of the problem is that there is lawlessness and mass violence and mass crime happening in cities. I think that the Stop Asian Hate movement comes from woke left-wing social movement to kind of make it into this argument of minorities being persecuted, when I don't think that's the core of the problem. I think the core of the problem is it's just dangerous in our cities.
Originally, when you asked what Stop Asian Hate means to you, the first word that popped in my mind was ignorance. It goes beyond more than the way that people were just acting out and attacking people. Some people were avoiding other people. Some people were like, oh no, you can't go over to that house because they're Asian, they're Japanese, they're Chinese. So that also is a version of hate. So before we go too far into the specifics of crime, there was even just, social injustices. And that is one of the things that I think that people might overlook.
Yuleng?
In regards to just the term Stop Asian Hate, the reason why I feel like it falls short is not because of the sentiment. I think that there is definitely prejudice and absolutely hate against Asians in this country. But I think sometimes that we view that violence very specific, I'm gonna beat you up because you're Asian, and that is the violence. And I think sometimes, like on a larger scale, that violence also shows up in ways in which, like, housing, education, healthcare, a lot of that.
And so now, let's move on to the main event, because a lot of what's behind the disagreements that we're having today seems to be related to politics. How many of you here would say that you're progressive or liberal? Raise of hands. And how many would say conservative or not progressive and liberal? Undecided? Okay. Are Asians invisible in American
Very well
politics?
balanced.
Are they visible? Do Asian Americans have political power? Let's take visibility.
Not visible enough. But that is a consequence of the mentality towards politics for a lot of Asians. You don't participate in the system, nobody's gonna care what you have to say, period. Which is why I've made it a point to participate in the system. You know, I don't go around saying, well, I'm Asian, that's why I deserve to be here. But just me being in the room is a step above what's kind of the sort of awareness, the political awareness of specifically the Indian community, in my opinion. You know, that's been my experience. So I don't think that they're visible enough. And the reason they're not visible is because they don't participate and do the work behind it.
So that engagement, civic engagement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you on that in terms of, I think it's more than that, but I do agree as lack of engagement or, you know, claiming to be apolitical. I think when Kamala became vice president, there wasn't really that much support that I saw from the Asian community. And she's our first Asian American woman to be elected in such a high position of office. So where is the support? Just because she may not look a specific way.
So what you're saying is that the broader Asian American community, which might include East Asians and otherwise, didn't speak up enough for having a South Asian person like Kamala Harris of mixed race become vice president of the United States. So divisions within itself.
Yes. Like, I did not see very many East Asians come out and be like, you know, Asian American representation. But I saw plenty of Black people come out and be like, Black representation, you know? So there is definitely a lot of divisiveness within our own communities that we need to understand.
And that's just because people don't even really know, if I'm being honest, because Kamala Harris ran in 2020, ran under Joe Biden in 2020 when it was the popular thing to be Black American. So what was she around then? She was Black Queen Kamala. She was using all the Black phrases. She was doing the pandering that we've all seen Democrats like Kamala Harris to do for decades now. She was raising her fist in all these different things and trying to act more Black. To appeal to that group and get them to vote for her. And how well that worked, I'm not quite sure. But that was it. So if Stop Asian Hate had been happening more in 2020, then I'm sure you would see a lot more East Asians being like, oh yeah, that's our girl Kamala Harris, not exclusively based off appearances, though I think that has something to do with it, but more because she probably would have been campaigning more along the lines of, oh well, I'm Indian, I'm part Indian, I have, you know, this racial group in me, I'm part Asian, so I have all these, and that would have done more benefit for her insofar as East Asians and such being like, yeah, that's our girl. But the fact of the matter is, not many people actually know she is Asian because she didn't really advertise it. It wasn't quite that beneficial to her campaign.
Recognize being Asian is not just being East Asian.
Maybe Asians didn't feel represented by Kamala Harris. Maybe people just don't like Kamala Harris. Like, she's one of the least popular vice presidents, I believe, in like recent history. I don't know if it's like an Asian exclusive thing. I just think a lot of people were not a fan.
Why don't you think they like her?
She comes off as obnoxious and pretentious, and they don't like her politics.
Can I piggyback off that? I think Kamala Harris does not get the love from the Asian community because she picks and chooses when she wants to be whatever her
That's what I was just saying.
identity is.
Right?
When she's on TV, on camera, you know, I'm a Black woman, blah, 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 blah. But she only claims her Indian and Asian background when she's in the fundraisers with the rich Indians.
Yep.
She's doing it to herself. She's dividing her identity by playing up, you know, code switching. I know AOC likes to use the word code switching to the Black community when she's on camera, and then code switching to the Asian community when she's raising money. Don't be surprised if, you know, you only come around when you're asking for a check, and then we're not in the streets, you know, as hard as you would like us to be. But then again, you don't go on camera wearing a dot on your head and the jasmine in your hair. Right? And wearing a sari. Show me a picture of Kamala in a sari. Right? When was the last time? I've seen Justin Trudeau wearing Indian clothes before. You know what I mean? So don't give me the nonsense, right? Like, it's her fault that Asians don't get behind her.
Good one with Trudeau.
For her trying to win over people, do you think that maybe as a choice to not represent that, to be more relatable to the masses, could be the reason why she acts the way that she acts? I don't know.
Are you saying Asians are not relatable to the American public?
Yes. To some, yeah. No, to some. Being in a position where you
Interesting.
have this generalization of how a standard American is supposed to be, and then all of a sudden, depending on the social climate, there is a lot of pressure on people to be a specific person. And so when you're someone in that light, trying to get support from different people, not even saying that she's right or wrong, I'm just saying that could possibly be a motive.
She did it to herself. If you just called yourself American, you wouldn't be in this mess.
I
Right?
think-
But you switch the identity based on the need. And that is the problem.
I think Kamala exists.
It's politically
and
expedient.
You kind of saw this when Biden chose her. She exists to basically appeal to like the woke diversity mob. Like that's the truth. Biden said, I'm gonna pick a woman, and then he said, I'm gonna pick a woman of color, quote unquote, ended up with Kamala Harris. And I just think that a lot of people outside of Ivy League educations find that stuff off-putting. In general America, a lot of people of all different colors are very off-put by her entire political presentation and existence because they're off-put by the
Women,
woke diversity,
black people,
liberal nonsense.
they're off-put by a woman in
Put
leadership.
words in his mouth. You put words in his mouth. What are you accomplishing, huh? You think you're actually convincing anybody? No, you're just making yourself sound like an idiot.
I'm chiming in here.
Apparently, even like women of color and black women, even like
Guys, as we
her
talked about-
approval rating in general sucks.
I agree.
Why? Because
Let's get off
like
the
that.
approval rating for a second. I want to hold on one point of yours, which is
Okay.
she's a token. That's what I heard from you.
Sure. I think Biden chose her absolutely as a token.
So I want to know how you respond to sort of what Vince was saying, that Kamala Harris effectively was a token pick because demographic boxes, and specifically an Asian American demographic box.
I feel like anytime a person of color gets chosen, we're looked at as a token, especially in institutions. It's historical, like it's new to us, right? So in one sense, I think there's some truth to it, even in our own communities, I think. Is she a token? Like we second guess ourselves. You start to second guess, are you worth it? Because you're constantly being
Am I
questioned.
qualified?
Did you get here because you were diversity hire or, this is the existence that we live in right now.
I mean, when you have presidential candidates like Joe Biden running on the idea of having a woman of color in such positions more than anything about whether they're actually qualified for the job, I think that's going to call up the idea of, oh, well, maybe this is a token diversity hire more than anything. I mean, yes, we see examples of this in communities. I'm sure when, and I don't remember it that well, I was young, but Barack Obama was running, some people voted for him just because he was black. That's all it was. I know when I was younger, I supported him just because he was black. I didn't have much political ideations back then, but I liked him because he looked like me. And so we can see examples of that a lot more in history, but I think that's going to go away as more and more people start to homogenize within America. Having different skin colors is just going to be part of the culture. But if you start running a campaign and say, I'm going to nominate a black woman to be on the Supreme Court, like Joe Biden did, you're going to have people saying, well, why couldn't you just say you're going to nominate somebody who, I don't know, knows the law, or somebody who is going to support the things you support and interpret the Constitution in such ways to do that, as presidents have done for decades now. Instead, you just talk about what's between her legs and what her skin color is. That's how you get to the diversity hire sort of tokenization of this entire process.
And so Kamala Harris is actually very representative of what we face. You can say token all day long, but you can't take that away.
People will
Guess not.
scrutinize her. However, what about the other people, other 47 presidents who've definitely done their fair share? I'd say probably worse things.
Yes,
who,
absolutely.
Who are not nitpicked for what they are wearing, or like maybe not fitting in enough because they already fit in.
Or for being white.
Yeah.
Yet another white person.
Yeah, like a lot of people
voted
don't
for one.
agree with her politics.
Probably.
And like I don't want to take like her credentials away.
Yeah.
Because she earned it. She wasn't just a diversity pick. She was picked because she also
Put in the work.
She also put in the work.
Yeah, if the work is, again, making yourself the least popular vice president and also least popular vice presidential candidate, and even before that, least popular presidential candidate. You guys remember when she was polling at a grand 1% in the Democratic primaries back in, what was it, 2019? I think 2020 as well. Yeah, she wasn't doing too hot, my friend. So, I mean, if that's what you consider putting in the work, then she sure did it. She crashed and burned, and then she was added to the Biden ticket. It was the Biden-Harris ticket, and that got carried across the line in whatever way it was. And I guess if that's what you consider the work, then great job.
I'd like to hear from the women in the panel about the specifics that we're talking about, because not only is she the first Black and Asian American vice president, she's also the first woman. Choice.
I disagree with Kamala's politics, I'll say it, but at the same time, she's representative of a woman, and I think we should give her some award for that. Like,
credit?
You know, I like credit, yes, that's the word that I was looking for. This is my point exactly with plain identity politics. Like, who cares if she's Black? Who cares if she's a woman? Like, if she got there on her own merit, that's what's important.
Elaine?
I haven't really thought too much about her being a token so much. I think I'm more interested in, well, what will you do now that you're in office? Will things still change, or is it?
What would that look like?
Yeah, and it's great because obviously you do want the optics. You do hope, and you put a lot of that pressure on that person who you feel might represent you. If I wanted to talk really about representation, I'd be like, put somebody poor up there. I don't want anybody rich running the government. Sorry, like, you know what I mean? It's just
What?
kind of like, what's the pulse on your country, on your actual citizens? So that's what I'm interested in.
Let's talk about higher education and affirmative action. So I think a lot of our conversation, the rubber hits the road on this topic. And because plaintiffs challenging affirmative action rules, there are Asian Americans who are banding together to do that.
I think of affirmative action as a scam. It's an excuse to make race-based hiring decisions. And I think that that's wrong. And I think that everything should be based on merit.
The students that are picked by affirmative action are top-tier students.
Yeah.
They're not like some D+ students that are getting picked just based on race. They already are performing at a very top level themselves and proven themselves to be picked.
Despite systemic barriers.
Despite systemic barriers, if they are good enough to not need affirmative action, then the action would be affirmed to them. And what I'm trying to say is that they would be good enough to appeal in that program, despite the fact that they are Black or any other race whatsoever. And so making these race-based decisions defeats the purpose, if I'm being honest.
I think to a reasonable extent, you could say, okay, if someone grew up in like total poverty and they didn't have the same opportunities, then you can lower the standard a little bit. What I would still say is I think there has to be some proof still of capability. Right now,
Yes.
There's a left-wing movement to remove SAT and standardized testing. So in my opinion, sure, the SAT may not be a perfect test. I think it's decent. That is what actually levels the playing field, is saying we have to take the same test. It doesn't matter what your teacher, how hard they grade, you pay them off, private school education, you know, that's the environment where it's like totally even.
Sure, it's one way to measure intelligence, but that's also assuming that intelligence can only be assessed in one way. How do you compare someone who is just as smart, or, you know, maybe even if they didn't get the SAT score, as like their classmate who literally paid a tutor for 4 years.
Every single day, yep.
You know, versus this person, they took the test twice in their life and then they put a bunch of their savings into paying for the test.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to compare these people and say that one is more deserving?
So I think to level the playing field, like, we need to improve our local schools. Not every school is the same. Like, if you're in a poor community, you don't have the best teachers. So we want to hold all the teachers accountable for giving top grade education so everybody's leveled. And then it wouldn't matter which race or socioeconomic position that you're taking. I don't agree with like getting rid of affirmative action altogether. I think it needs reform.
What about like legacy kids? I think that it's great to take into account, you know, the systems in power that have intentionally made sure that certain people, and specifically Black and brown people, cannot have access to education. I think that's a great way to try to level that playing field at the least. If a kid
we
can
don't
get
see
in,
a fuss being made about legacy kids ever. When do you ever hear about that?
Exactly, it's that like people get a lot more up in arms, I would say, when it's like, oh, well, so you just got in because of your, you know, race.
What do you think the future of Asian Americans in America and American politics is?
The paradigm we are going through now, especially with our relations with different ethnic groups and everything, I think that we are headed towards balkanization. and the future of America is starting to look like Bosnia. And so I want to avoid that.
You know, within our generation, at least what I've seen, a lot more Asian Americans who are interested in politics, who are interested in bringing more representation and bringing more, saying like, we've had enough. You know, this is not how we need to be treated, how we deserve to be treated. So like, I think in terms of involvement, there will be a higher involvement of Asian Americans. And also just the mere fact that we had Asian American representation, whether it's Kamala or Andrew Yang just even running, that shows
Every
people
time Kamala.
that, hey, maybe that could be me.
Yeah.
I'm allowed. I think that one of the biggest things that representation does is it says, I'm allowed to do that because I see someone that looks like me do that.
Yeah.
And I think just exactly what you said is that, you know, with Black Lives Matter, Asian hate, we learned that if we work together as people of color,
Yes.
and that's where I think,
Yes.
that's what it means to me, is that we as a group working together get more done.
Again, reducing it back to us versus them, black versus white, you're not accomplishing anything.
Yes.
And that if we support each other and we do this, we can get more of ourselves up there.
I think you will definitely see some people actually move to the right because of that. How big will it be? I don't really know. Probably not as big as a lot of Republicans hope, but I think it will happen.
What do I think about the future? I'm gonna be hopeful because I think that oftentimes, like, we are characterized as just angry, right? And that our politic isn't rooted.
Makes me angry.
Yeah. But and our politic isn't rooted in love and isn't rooted in community,
Yes.
isn't rooted in hope, and I hope that it is, right? And so what I'm hopeful about is that we can sit here and name politicians who look like us and sound like us.
Yes.
And that wasn't the case when I was a kid. I didn't think that that was possible. So from where I'm sitting, like, I think the future of Asian American leadership looks like telling our own stories in community with other people who haven't had their stories told yet.
Just from seeing sort of the agitation within our own communities, I think just like with movements and like being tired of staying silent. I think that's part of going back to also that model minority myth of like, I'm gonna mind my business, I'm just gonna do my thing, and you guys just fight it out over there. You know, I think that like seeing the passion kind of jump out is very beautiful to witness. And so hopefully I think that the future, at least that I envision, is one where we can maybe see more humanity in each other. I think that as an Asian American, a lot of how I've viewed myself has been through a lens of self-hatred and shame. With the moment that we're in right now, even this conversation that we've been able to have, I think that the difference that I hopefully feel is that we're not gonna sit on the sidelines and be like, that's not my business. I think now we're ready to be like, that is my business, and I'm gonna be vocal about it. So I don't know what that looks like in the future, but I think that my hope is that it looks more like community care.
Right.
You know, white children in this country grew up with the mentality, I can be president one day. We didn't have that. and we're just now like, oh, could it be us? What I hear a lot in your reasons for being Republican or thinking the way you do is that you don't want to be seen as a victim. I see that, I hear that very loud and clear. And it's rooted in kind of that logic that pits you against yourself. That you constantly walk around with this idea, I'm not a victim. But it doesn't just end with you. We are people that come from community. One of the things, even though we are not a monolith, a lot of our cultures can unite in the fact that we believe in community. And I know when people, you know, when we talk as passionately as we do, it sounds like we're complaining to some people, but we have seen progress and we know it's possible. So yes, we are hopeful that our children can even have it better than us.
To your point, you said, you know, you feel like in some situations I'm pitted against myself.
Yeah, what does that mean?
You're 100% right. I am my #1 competition, and I'm going to win because I am the representation.
I don't doubt that you're gonna win.
The conversation about representation, I got to see somebody who looks like me in order for me to believe. No. I am that guy. I am gonna put.
Not
I'm
everybody
going.
has
I'm
your
gonna put
belief.
myself
I
there,
love
right?
that you
Like
have
that. Like I'm gonna be that representation. I am that representation every day.
And the way she's saying, and not everybody's like that, once again proves the entire solution to this problem is to stop looking at it by skin color. All right. I will admit, when I was younger, seeing Obama as president made me think, wow, I can do that. But I also, when I was even younger than that, said, well, you don't really need to be. It doesn't really matter. I liked Obama, but then I liked some other presidential candidates, not just because they were black, not just because they were white, because I actually liked the way they spoke. I respected their ideas. And then as I got older, I learned I disagreed with some of them. I agreed with some of the other ones. It is what it was. Even when Trump was president, I was like, well, we don't have a black president anymore, but I could still be president. There's a lot of people out there that don't look at it the way that that lady does and look at it the way that Vish does, in which he says, I don't care if there's somebody that may look like me or sound like me up there. If I want to be up there next, I got next. That's the difference between him and her and other people out there in society, whether they're white, because there are some white people that look at things and say, yeah, I can't be that guy. It's not about race. It's about your mindset. It is about merit. It is about working hard and earning it. And that's the most important thing that we need to remember, so we can stop literally creating a victimhood through it when there doesn't need to be one. And the idea that victimhood or viewing yourself as not a victim is somehow putting yourself against yourself doesn't make any sense.
Guess what, guys? We were all that representation today. So thank you.
I don't know about all that.
For the passionate responses. You're gonna get a bunch of us in the room together. We're not gonna agree. That's just how it is.
Yes.
So appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're basically paisans.
I think the term Asian Americans should be erased.
Asian Americans are awesome.
Closing thought on Asian American.
I love that. I love that little bit right there. All right, so that was my entire reaction to the video right there. Obviously, we skipped a little bit here and there to try and get to some of the juicier bits, but I'd say that was a really, really fun time. Hearing Vince and Vishra just absolutely deliver the knockdown on some of these people, and then hearing them like just go absolutely insane. But then at some points, them saying some rather agreeable points, and I'm saying them because I don't remember all their names. I just know the names of the two folks that I've met, and then also I think Joyce as well. I remember her name, which shows a little bit of my bias on this one. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I did. And let me know in the comments who you think won, if there's even a competition right there. But anyways, it's all available for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time, free thinkers. Don't forget to spread the virus of intelligence.